I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is a case and alleged murder plot filled with sex, deception, BDSM, and extreme violence. A plan so twisted, you might wonder how anyone could even think it up. Here's the story. In Herndon, Virginia, a shadowed conspiracy lurks behind a manicured suburban facade. Brendan Banfield, a former IRS criminal investigator, is accused of orchestrating a chilling double murder of a man named Joseph Ryan and his own wife, Christine. Prosecutors allege Banfield lured Joseph Ryan to his home early in the morning to make him appear as an intruder coming to kill his wife with a knife. Brendan Banfield allegedly shot Ryan and then stabbed his own wife with help from his lover, the family au pair, Juliana Magalhães. Juliana was the first to be arrested and charged in the case, but she then admitted her guilt and will be the star witness in the case against the husband, Brendan Banfield, who claims his innocence. What is the truth? Who killed who? And why did they do it? That will be up to a Virginia jury to decide. This trial is coming up here on Court TV, so get ready, folks. This is something else. Something else when you talk about a really twisted, alleged murder plot, double murder plot in this case. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, we're getting ready for this trial. Let's break it down. Can you break it down for the folks watching what exactly this alleged plot/scheme was that prosecutors say Banfield came up with?
Well, yeah, Vinny, a scheme, that's the perfect way to put it. Like a very elaborate plan that prosecutors say with Brendan Banfield trying to make this plan to kill his wife and frame someone else, allegedly luring this man to their home to try to make this man out to be a home invader. But Vinny, we'll start here. Brendan created this profile for his wife, Christine Banfield, on a social networking site called FetLife, pretty much a social networking site for people that have weird fetishes. That profile then matched with the male victim, Joseph Ryan. Joseph began messaging the person he thought was Christine, and then plans formed for a meetup at the Banfield's house. Now, we also know that Juliana Magalhães, the au pair, pretended to be Christine in a voicemail to Joseph. Then Joseph thought this was going to be a consensual sexual encounter. Now, in her police interview, Juliana gave insight into what they told Joseph about how Christine would be playing along with the idea that he was sort of attacking her in this sexual fantasy type of way. And Vinny, what I want to do now, I want you to take a listen to this from a police interview obtained by NBC4 in Washington, D.C. Take a listen.
We told other people before that it was kind of part of the game where the person gets in the bedroom and then I may act like scared, like try to run or try to scream, but like, or if the person starts doing something, she would just get kind of freaked out and try to resist, but it was like part of the game.
And Vinny, this next part is also from NBC4 in Washington, D.C. In that police interview, she also says Brendan was the, quote, mastermind who came up with the plan to stage Christine's murder. He made changes to the house to soundproof it. He put in very expensive new windows, and they tested the noise levels. Now, Christine bought tickets for her daughter and Juliana to go to the zoo that day in February of 2023. They were going to leave early that morning. Juliana claimed she drove back to the house because she forgot their lunches. Now, Brendan seemingly leaves for work, but he instead sits in a nearby McDonald's parking lot. Now, the plan was for Juliana to call him when she saw Joseph pretending to see a strange man, and then Brendan would eventually rush home. Now, here's where everyone was when Joseph Ryan was arriving at the house. Juliana and the daughter are parked outside the house. Then they go inside. Christine is asleep in the bedroom. Brendan is returning from the McDonald's. Now, Juliana and Brendan follow Joseph into the master bedroom armed with guns. And they say they found Joseph stabbing Christine. Joseph is then shot to death, and Christine dies from stab wounds. Now, the au pair said this about Brendan stabbing Christine in her police interview. Again, this is from NBC4 Washington, Vinny. It says, quote, "He was stabbing her, and she was just telling him, Let me go. I'm going to die anyways. I'm going to bleed to death, Perez said. She was just, leave me here. Let me die. And he was telling her, I can't. I don't know why he said, I can't. Christine was stabbed multiple times in different parts of her body, police said. And Vinny, we know Juliana was actually the one who had to talk to police once they arrived at the house that day responding to this incident. Here's what she looked like trying to explain the incident to police initially on the scene. Take a listen.
And then we went upstairs first, and then I went to see what's going on. And I heard the guy was, I don't know who was. I don't know what he was doing. He was spanking her. I don't know.
He was what?
He's spanking her. I heard, I don't know what was that.
And Vinny, one more important thing to note, Juliana has admitted to shooting Joseph Ryan at least once.
Wow. This, I mean, elaborate, but absolutely twisted if this thing is true. Thanks, Cody. Cody's going to stick around all hour. That brings us to the first question in our investigation, and it'll be a question really for the jury ultimately. Will prosecutors be able to prove their theory? Will they be able to prove this? I mean, this is very, very elaborate. But as I said, like, how do you even think this thing up? I'm going to put my wife on a BDSM fetish website to hook her up with some guy and then convince the guy to come over to the house with a knife and then we're going to shoot everybody? All right. Joining me, former justice reporter at the Washington Post who has covered this case extensively, Tom Jackman is with us. Tom, great to see you. I know you've covered a lot of crime and justice through the years. Just to start things off here, like, have you ever seen anything quite like this alleged plot?
Nope. It was somewhat complicated to draw in another person, but Brendan Banfield thought that he was smarter.
So what are your thoughts here? What type of evidence are they going to be able to put in front of this jury, Tom?
Well, you just saw the chief witness. That's Juliana Magalhães, and she's the case. She, plus the forensic evidence of the bodies being moved, but she's the one. There she is. She came out and told this extensive lie to one of the first police officers on the scene, and a year later, she recanted that lie, more like a year and a half later, and said, no, we arranged this. We arranged for the man to come to the house, and I spoke to the man, and then she said from day one, she shot Joe Ryan. She admits she shot Joe Ryan. So she's the case against Brendan Banfield, whether or not she's believable.
Right. That's another question, right? That's another question. So let's do this. We've got another guest with us. Joining us, retired police commander, host of the new podcast, Gardens of Evil, Inside the Zion Society Cult, coming out in February. Mike King is here. All right, Mike, great to have you. Excited about the new podcast as well. Let's start here. You know, you've got to prove the case. You've got this wild theory. The defendant is former law enforcement for the IRS. For me, that almost makes it more believable that someone like that would come up with a very elaborate scheme. What are your thoughts?
I got to agree with you on this one, Vinny, because it makes really good sense that somebody that had some insider baseball knowledge has done and taken part in this thing. If the elaborate scheme that the prosecution has come up with is going to prove out in court, there are a lot of challenges, obviously, with things that we've heard about and read about. But somebody has got to have the skill set to be able to not only understand the need for an alibi or another reason like this man, Ryan, who comes to the home, it's also got to have the ability to say, hey, I'm going to create this false way into her phone and to create this account on that website in order to pull this off. Because I think that the defense is going to be pretty darn successful in arguing that law enforcement's expert, the forensic expert from the PD, is saying, hey, I don't believe that she ever lost access to her phone. So there's got to be another way in. Is it a duplicate account, some kind of a ghost account that has created the ability for him to go in and manage that website and manage that profile? I just think it all points to somebody with a little more deep knowledge in the technology, and frankly, somebody that's working at the federal level in intel and in investigations may have that access.
Yeah, Tom, how much do we know about Banfield and his background? And I understand, he's law enforcement for the IRS, but that's kind of the limit of what I know. Do we know more about him?
Well, he was sort of a tax investigator for years and had not been in law enforcement until, I want to say, just a couple of years before this. But to respond to the previous point, the prosecutors believe that Brendan and Juliana were able to access Christine's laptop when she didn't have it. Or if she was on the laptop, they were able to access her phone. They were able to access her other devices to act as her and to create the forensic footprint of being Christine, acting as Christine by using one of the devices that she wasn't on. And that does not take a giant amount of technical know-how, which I think you're right, he probably did not gain during his years as an IRS criminal investigator.
And Mike, you think about to come up with this idea, you've got to be like racking your brain. I want to commit the perfect crime, and there has to be like a little bit of arrogance involved in all of that.
Yes, and the thing that I find so intriguing is based on the fact that he has spent a career doing investigations at, I think, a little higher level than the guy who goes out and commits a robbery on the street and it turns into a homicide. This is a guy who's looked at things like being able to hide records on a computer, being able to extract records, to find ghost accounts, to create and understand how information could be moved around and done clandestinely. And yes, I mean, it really smacks with this idea of, I can pull this off. And when you start putting this thing together in totality, Vinny, that really starts to become a whole lot more intriguing, because what was it that caused him to just happen to be down the street at the McDonald's at the right moment in time? What was it about that relationship that he and the au pair were having and her being involved in making that phone call at just the right time, at him leaving that home in time for Ryan to show up and be there when Christine's there alone and have this whole thing come together? I think in totality, we're going to see this thing be much more convincing than if we look at the singular pieces of it. Because again, when you focus on some of those singular pieces, you can really get tied up in the weeds and get lost in the story by saying, well, no, she held on to her phone most of the time. Well, that negates any opportunity or doesn't negate the opportunity for him to go out and create ghost accounts and manage that.
Yeah. Mike, great to have you on. And again, looking forward to Gardens of Evil, new podcast coming out in February. Thanks so much. Tom's going to stick around. Coming up next, will the jury believe the au pair's testimony?
It's bringing her. I don't know.
What?
It's bringing her. I heard, like, I don't know, what was that?
I'm going to ask you a lot of intensely personal questions.
From the crime scene to the courtroom, this is Victim to Verdict.
Everyone has this heightened sense of anticipation.
What a day here at Court TV.
Fireworks both inside and outside the courthouse.
Let the cameras roll.
Okay, so you live here?
I'm Vinnie. Au pair.
You're an au pair? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It was a lot of blood.
I guess that's the first time the law enforcement knows that she's the au pair in the home who ends up pairing up with the widower shortly after all of this happened. Let's get back to Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. All right, Cody, what's going on right now with the au pair?
Well, Vinny, one thing we do know about the au pair is that her story has changed over the last few months. We know the nuts and bolts of her original story, of course, because we've seen that body cam footage. We've seen the initial interactions with police. She's emotional. She's talking about this random car she saw outside of the house. Let's take a look at a portion of that body cam to revisit that initial story.
And Brendan said, police dropped the knife, because he had a knife. And then he said, drop the gun to Brendan. They were yelling. I couldn't understand. We were super fast.
Okay. Okay. You want me to see if I can try to get you some water? Yeah.
So, Vinny, remember that, this all happened in February of 2023, but she wasn't arrested until October of 2023, about 8 months later. Now, when she finally sat down with police after that arrest, that story flipped. This is according to the Washington Post. It says, quote, in October, Perez Magalhães sat down with police and prosecutors and provided a lengthy statement recanting the claim of a home invasion. Court records show. She said Brendan Banfield had planned the killings and arranged for Ryan to appear at the house with a knife as a result of online discussions the two men previously had. Now, Vinny, in that police interview, the au pair described Brendan allegedly coming up with the plan to kill Christine and what kind of fall guy they were searching for. Now, this video, of course, obtained by NBC4 in Washington, D.C. Take a look.
He said, that's not what I'm thinking about. And then he explained that he was thinking about finding a way to just get rid of her. Somebody that sounded like violent and was kind of playing the way he wanted the person to play.
And then, Vinny, after that, Juliana strikes the sweetest of sweetheart deals. According to reporting by the Washington Post, it says Juliana Perez Magalhães, 24 years of age, who had been charged with second-degree murder in the case, which drew international attention, pleaded guilty to a manslaughter charge. In exchange for her cooperation, prosecutors agreed to recommend that she be released on time served after the trial of her employer. So, Vinny, it seems there is, a slight coincidence here between when she's arrested, her story flipping, and when that deal gets made.
Yeah, I don't know if that's a coincidence or that's negotiation. At the end of the day, that is a sweetheart deal, and I'm sure that will be a big part of her cross-examination, or at least the beginning of a very intense cross-examination, which brings us to the next question in our investigation. Will the jury believe the au pair's testimony? As we learned in our first segment, she's the case. She is the prosecution's case. That's why she had to get a deal like that. They need her. All right, still with me, former Washington Post reporter Tom Jackman. Tom, you said it, she's the case. So now the question, will the jury believe her? This is a deal of deals, right? She finishes testifying, the case is, the trial's over, she's done. She'll probably head back to Brazil.
Well, she's going to get deported to Brazil. So, and she will have spent about 2.5 to 3 years in jail for involuntary manslaughter in a case in which she apparently conspired to kill a guy and has said from day one that she shot Joe Ryan in the chest. So Joe Ryan's family is extremely unhappy with this deal, but the prosecutors felt like they had to do it. They had to have her. They had to have her to make the deal. They had charged Brendan Banfield a month before, and they got her to flip. So I think one of the interesting things may be if the defense shows her original statement and then contrast that with her on the witness stand. So that gives the jury a whole lot of things to consider, because she did a heck of a nice acting job.
Absolutely, right? You watch that body cam and she's like in character. She's obviously shaken because two people have just been murdered, by the way, so that's going to shake her up. But the bottom line is she's lying through her teeth right here, according to her own latest statement. So,
and doing a good job. I mean, she's emotional, she's out of breath, she needs water, you know, she's troubled.
Yeah, and her hands are actually, she literally has blood on her hands as she's giving that statement. So, Tom, as we think about, you know, the jury and how they're going to handle this, the only experience we have down there was the Johnny Depp trial. We did that a few years ago. And that jury, you know, that was a big credibility call. They had to decide who was telling the truth in that one, Johnny Depp or Amber Heard. They believed much more of Johnny Depp's testimony. So this really comes, because I don't know if he's going to testify. I don't know if Banfield testifies or if they just make her sort of the fall person for this and try to just undermine her credibility, that you can't trust her beyond a reasonable doubt. What do we know about her background? Is there anything else that might come up here in addition to sleeping with, you know, the child's father when you're hired as an au pair / nanny?
Well, we don't know of any problems that she had in Brazil. She came to this country at like 21 years old. There's ample evidence, as you're seeing, about her affair with Brendan Banfield. I don't think that's in dispute. My experience with juries is, if you put a witness on who says, Mr. X did this murder, and the defense says, yes, but aren't you getting a sweetheart deal? The witness will say, yes, but I still say Mr. X did this murder, and the juries typically aren't troubled by the deal. They will say, okay, we believe this person. Now, here's the interesting thing. There's a whole nother video statement that she gave where she's lying. And so now there isn't just a deal. There is a previous time where she acted out an incredible charade of saying that they had interrupted Joe Ryan killing Christine Banfield for reasons we would never know, and that she then shot Joe Ryan. So it's a lot for the jury to digest. My experience is typically juries believe witnesses like this, but here they've got that other component of her lying on video to the police the day of.
Right, right. Let's bring in another guest we've got with us, former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney at Gelman Law. David Gelman is back with us. David, great to see you. What are your thoughts? Do you think the jury's going to believe the au pair's testimony? Because I think prosecutors need the jury to believe her beyond a reasonable doubt.
Vinny, you nailed it on the head previously when you said she's their whole case. So they're banking that the jury better believe her. And I kind of agree. I think that juries do tend to believe these co-defendants who cut deals. However, in this situation, it's not like a normal one, because she had a story in the beginning. It was really good, real good theatrics. And then she came and did a complete 180 when she was interrogated by the police. So that, I think, is going to be the million-dollar question if you think about it. But at the end of the day, look, I understand this is the sweetheart of the sweetheart deals. I mean, I've never seen a manslaughter become a time served after a trial. But I do think that at the end of the day, the jury will probably believe her. She does seem credible enough for the jury. But again, defense attorneys, if I'm there, I am going at her all day long, because there is no way that I would let her get out of there unscathed.
Yeah, that is going to be the moment in this case. All right, Tom's going to stick around.
There is one thing, Vinny.
Go ahead, Tom.
Just that there is forensic evidence that the bodies were moved, and that the bodies don't match up with their initial description of what happened. And also, there were some initial 911 calls by Juliana, and then there's nothing for 10 or 15 minutes. Then they call back again and say, oh, did we forget to mention there was a double murder here at the house? And the bodies are not where the blood, nothing matches with their description of the story. So there is some physical evidence to corroborate the prosecution's claim that these guys did it.
Absolutely need that. All right, Tom's going to stick around. David Gelman, thank you so much. I know we had some difficulty connecting, but I'm glad that we did. Still to come, were Brendan Banfield and the au pair planning a life together? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the alleged murder plot of Christine Banfield and Joseph Ryan, who died one morning as the result of extreme violence. And prosecutors say it was all a twisted plot by an armed IRS agent who wanted to share his bed with a young Brazilian au pair instead of his wife, the mother of his 4-year-old child. Here's the story. Brendan Banfield, the former IRS criminal investigator, is accused of masterminding a twisted and calculated plot to murder his wife, Christine Banfield, inside their Herndon, Virginia home. Prosecutors allege that Brendan, seeking to escape his marriage and pursue a secret affair with the family's Brazilian au pair, Juliana Magalhães, posed online as Christine to lure a man named Joseph Ryan under false pretenses of a sexual encounter. Once Joseph Ryan arrived, Brendan allegedly shot him in the head, then turned the knife that Joseph Ryan had on his own wife, stabbing her to death. The au pair, who later pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, claimed she participated under Brendan's influence. Authorities say the murder scene was staged, but Brendan maintains his innocence. Was this a chilling act of betrayal, seduction, and premeditated violence fueled by lust and deception? Or is the husband the victim of a lying au pair lover? This trial just around the corner. It's getting ready to start, folks. Let's bring in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Let's talk about what is, you look at the whole twisted murder plot and then you get to the alleged why of it. So let's get into the relationship between the au pair and Brendan Banfield.
Yeah, Vinny, so this is where the lines start to get just a little bit blurred because there's this allusion to an affair, but then Brendan Banfield denies that. We do know that Juliana Magalhães moved into the house with the Banfields in October of 2021, about a year and a half before the killing of Christine took place. But Vinny, let's begin with an exhibit from court documents. Now, this is a photo of Juliana Magalhães at a gun range. Now, we know that both Brendan Banfield and Juliana Magalhães checked into their local gun range on 2 different dates in the months before the deaths of Joseph Ryan and Christina on October 29th, 2022 and December 23rd of 2022, both within 4 months of the 2 killings. Now, Vinny, we go forward. These are pictures of both of them on a trip to New York City. And these pictures are from January of 2023, a month before the killings. But this again just kind of shows they were a little closer than you would imagine a married man would be with a younger woman, right? A little close to each other. Then we have another picture of both of them in a hot tub. Another image showing just how, intimate these two were, even though this man here, Brendan Banfield, was married. Now, Vinny, what I'm about to show you now, this is a picture of the closet belonging to the au pair. This is February of 2023. This is her room where she stayed in the house. And on the left, you can see we've identified a Brazilian soccer jersey along with another red piece of clothing, the soccer jersey matching her Brazilian flag hanging above her bed. Now we fast forward 8 months later, October of 2023. Of course, this is the month that she gets arrested. Now, those clothes are in a closet, but there's not the same closet. That's the master bedroom closet. We've identified again the red article of clothing and that Brazilian jersey. So, Vinny, in the master bedroom, this is after Christina's been killed. Now she's moved into where Brendan's sleeping in the house. Now we have this photo here of the nightstand by the bed. Now we see the glaring photo of both of them on the nightstand, but Vinny, we've also identified some other things on the nightstand. We see the 2 water bottles here, presumably one belonging to Brendan, one belonging to her. And Vinny, we also identified one more thing on the nightstand, a bottle of lotion. Looks like it's Victoria's Secret brand. I don't know many men who wear Victoria's Secret lotion, but again, just showing how intimate these two were. This is just months after Christina, this man's wife, has been killed. Now, Vinny, as far as what the au pair is saying about the alleged affair, right? This is actually from reporting of Washington Post on behalf of her attorney. It says, in multiple hearings, Magalhães' attorney sought to minimize their relationship, saying in court that intimate encounters with the husband were casual and that Magalhães was on dating apps. So, Vinny, her attorney can downplay whatever relationship they had, but with all this these court exhibits and these photos of them, it seems like it might be an uphill battle to try to disprove that an affair was actually going on.
Yeah, especially we got pictures before the wife is even killed. Wow. Wow. Thanks, Cody. All right, that brings us to the next question in our investigation underlying everything in this case. Were Brendan Banfield and the au pair planning a life together? Right? Was the au pair going to step into the shoes of mom? Was already helping take care of the child? What was going on here? Joining me, East Coast contributor for Los Angeles Magazine, Lauren Conlin is with us, and clinical psychologist, gender, sex, and relationship diversity therapist, Dr. Lori Beth Bisbee. Great to see you both. Okay, Lauren, what are your thoughts here? Do you think, was it just a casual affair? Is it coincidental? Do you think they were planning a life together? How deep was this relationship from your perspective?
Vinny, please. I mean, I was born at night. I wasn't born last night. I don't think the jury will buy into any of that. And look, very early on in this case, I believe it was 2024, the chief of police came out and said that the entire motive for these killings was because Brendan and Juliana were in a relationship. And the next step to a relationship is, of course, building a life together. So as we know, Juliana is going to be testifying against Brendan Banfield at this trial. And Vinny, I'm so happy this trial is finally happening. I feel like we've been talking about this forever, but she's going to testify against him. And her testimony has to be corroborated with evidence, and it looks like it will be. And let's not also forget that she was arrested well before he was. They definitely have jailhouse phone calls between the two of them. I'm sure something slipped, and I'm sure we're going to hear it. So again, I go back and just say, look, we're not dumb. Nice try.
All right, Dr. Bisbee, what are your thoughts here? Is this just, a guy going, he's not really middle-aged, but going a little middle-aged crazy? Oh, we got a au pair in the house, and all of a sudden he gets smitten crazy? Or do you think this was more of a long-term type of plan?
I mean, I think he got smitten and then made a long-term plan. I think one of the things we also need to be cognizant of is there was definitely an imbalance of power in the relationship, because he was the one who held the visa. He was the one who held the passport. So there was incentive for her to go along with what he wanted. But from the imagery and from some of the statements made, it seemed that they had developed a romantic relationship and on both sides harbored fantasies of some form of life together.
And Dr. Bisbee, just a quick follow-up to that. How do you think it goes from this torrid affair and transitions into this really twisted, alleged murder plot?
I think there were things going on in his relationship with his wife before all of this. I don't think we have the whole story. I don't think we know what was going on under the surface. It was in some ways too detailed for him not to have had any knowledge of the world that he was trying to create a fantasy of. So he had some knowledge of the BDSM world. He had some knowledge of what people did with these sorts of meetups. So I really have to wonder what was going on in their marriage prior to Juliana even being there.
That's an interesting take. Very interesting. Lauren, what are your thoughts? Do you think that Magalhães, the au pair, do you think she was in love with this guy?
I mean, sure. Talk about an imbalance of power. Absolutely. And I had thoughts about this. I do feel like, and we know this because she's told us this, whether she's being truthful or not, but she did take some convincing to do this. She had said at one point she kind of wanted to back out, but she was told it was really too late. So I feel like he told her something about Christine to make her participate in this disgusting, elaborate, ridiculous plan here. I mean, I just don't see how Juliana would just say, oh yeah, that sounds good, without having some kind of foundation set. as to Christine either, in Brendan's eyes, being deserving of this somehow, or I've also heard his defense attorney say some horrible things that, she participated with other men sexually as well. That's victim blaming, in my opinion, and she does not deserve that. But yeah, I go back to we don't know the whole story. And I think many people are very anxious for this to go to trial so we can finally peel back the layers of what is most likely going to be even more complicated.
Yeah. Dr. Bisbee, what do you think that moment's going to be like when Juliana takes the witness stand? Do you think she'll be intimidated in the moment? Because that may be the first time that she's been back in the room with the man who she alleges set this whole thing in motion, a man that maybe she was planning to spend a life with.
If she truly has no history in courtrooms, yes, she will be intimidated. It's hard not to be intimidated, especially when you're giving evidence against somebody that you proclaim to have loved. Yeah. So I would expect her to be intimidated when she takes the stand.
All right, great to have you both here, Dr. Lori Beth Bisbee and Lauren Conlin, LA Magazine. Great to see you. Thanks so much. All right, coming up next, will the defense say that Christine Banfield was actually the one on the fetish website?
The school shooting that broke hearts around the country and broke trust with law enforcement.
Now, the officer sworn to protect those students faces a jury.
The Uvalde School Massacre Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings on Court TV.
Today, I'm pleased to announce that due to the hard work of police and prosecutors, the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office has secured an indictment against Brendan Banfield for the murder of his wife, Christine, and the murder of Mr. Ryan.
So getting back to this plot, or this alleged plot, right? They're saying that Brendan Banfield, pretended to be his wife on this fetish website in order to make the connection with Joseph Ryan to set up this rendezvous for some rough knife play, role play, kinky sex in the morning, right? So let's bring back in Cody Thomas, Court TV field reporter. Is there any evidence that it was Christine Banfield that was the one on this fetish website, not her husband pretending to be her?
Well, Vinny, not exactly, but there were a couple of detectives who believed that theory to be true. Now, according to reporting from the Washington Post, they say Banfield's defense attorneys took aim at the impersonation theory in court Thursday, arguing Fairfax police commanders reassigned 2 detectives who thought some evidence suggested Banfield's wife was the one sending messages to the man who died alongside her. They go on to say, but a summary of the case written by Detective Brendan Miller last year repeatedly describes the online conversations as between Ryan and Christine Banfield, and it states, quote, there is no indication that Christine lost control of her devices during the 6 weeks before the slayings. And Vinny, of course, this reporting refers to a previous hearing in the case. The case summary says there was no indication Christine was actually the one on this fetish website, but of course we'll have to see what the defense strategy comes out of this case once they actually go to trial here.
Yeah, and that trial is going to happen very, very, very soon. All right, Cody Thomas, thank you so much. That brings us to the final question in our investigation this hour, and it is, will the defense say that Christine Banfield was actually the one on the fetish website? Are they going to argue that? Still with me, former Washington Post reporter Tom Jackman, and joining me, criminal defense attorney Danny Rubin. Great to see you both. Tom, I'll start with you. Do you get the feeling that the defense is going to kind of lean in on that and say, no, it wasn't the au pair that was doing this? It obviously wasn't our client. It was Christine herself who was into this role-playing fetish stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, the the defense has subpoenaed virtually the entire homicide unit from the time this case happened because there's this great difference of opinion. The lead homicide detective and the lead computer forensics detective did believe that Christine was the one, while their bosses are saying, "You're crazy. It was the husband." This difference of opinion between the commanders thinking that Brendan Banfield did it and the lead detectives saying that Christine Banfield lured this guy to the house led to A, the detectives being booted off the case, and B, a hostile work environment complaint being filed by the detectives against the commanders because of this clash over did Christine do it. On top of that, an anonymous letter was sent to the defense last year which alleged that Christine Banfield was into this BDSM stuff and that was how this all unfolded. That letter was sent anonymously to the defense. They've never figured out who sent it. It came from the Banfield's hometown in Long Island. It just planted another seed that maybe Christine actually did it. There's still no explanation of why Joe Ryan, who's never harmed anybody in his life, would go to a house thinking he's having a sexual hookup and kill the person he's there to have a sexual hookup with.
Right, that's a great point. That is a great point. All right, Danny Rubin, what are your thoughts here? This is, this is new territory for us here on Court TV. I've never seen anything quite like this, the allegations in this case. Do you think that's where the defense is going to go? And if so, how do you think it plays out in the courtroom?
I think that's certainly where the defense is going. For one reason, they want to show a lack of premeditation. They want to sort of reduce the severity of the killings here. They could be making arguments that this is a manslaughter issue. They could be making arguments that the murder wasn't perpetuated by their client, by Brendan. But I think the significance in going after and poking holes in the prosecutor's theory here is that he's showing the divide between the lead detectives and the commanders. Now, this is something you don't see every day in court, where the police officers are actively taking a stand to what it seems like provide the truth on the stand, which is going against what their supervisors or commanders are saying. They obviously are doing that at great personal and professional expense. As it's shown, they were transferred shortly after. There are other reasons why that transfer may have happened, sure, but it seems pretty uncanny that they would transfer these detectives, or this detective, this lead detective, Brendan Miller, shortly after taking a stand against his commanders. Yeah. It would be
very
so
unusual.
much easier.
Very unusual. Danny Rubin, great to see you. We'll have more time next time. Appreciate it, Tom Jackman. Great work. Hope you'll come back again and again as we continue to cover this story. This trial will be interesting. Prosecutors have a cooperating witness, but one who got a sweetheart deal. Meanwhile, the defense has a sophisticated defendant who will likely have an extremely vigorous defense. The question is, for me, will Brendan Banfield take the stand? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.